Madam President, first I'd like to wish a very happy and healthy New Year to you, to all of our staff and pages who make the Senate run so efficiently every single day and frequently late into the night. The world's most deliberative body has unpredictable hours, which all too often means missing important events with family because we are here, going back and forth on the pressing issues of the day. This is why we have a Senate, after all, to give voice to the various viewpoints of Americans from each state and then try to resolve those differences. It isn't always easy since, unlike the House of Representatives, the Senate's unique rules require us to work together across party lines. I know what it's like to work with my Democratic friends. And in fact, I was named as one of the most bipartisan senators of either party in the past 25 years. That is what it takes to get things done here, because the rules force us to reach consensus. The Senate was created specifically to prevent a mob rule mentality. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, described the Senate as the anchor of the federal government that would act as a, quote, necessary fence against fickleness and passion, end quote. And George Washington famously said, the Senate was established to cool legislation passed by the House in the same way that a saucer cools hot tea. And folks, we certainly have seen a lot of hot mess coming over from the House. It's very concerning that the saucer intended to cool heated passions is itself beginning to boil over as a result of hot air from within. Senate Democrats are threatening to blow up the Senate, to fundamentally change the United States Senate, and to radically transform our country. It cannot be understated how detrimental this action would be to America. It would unravel 2 centuries of American representative democracy. It would silence millions of Americans and destroy what comedy remains within this body. I have to ask my colleagues, which side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to go down in the history books as the ones who turned the Senate, the world's most deliberative body, into the House of Representatives? The law of our land would dramatically sway back and forth, and the resulting political uncertainty would all but erase what little trust the people have in our governing institutions and lead to even greater political divisions. I don't think this is a future any of us want, and certainly not the one that was promised by President Biden when he pledged to the American people not to divide, but to unify our country. When the threat of blowing up the Senate arose during Mr. Biden's time in this institution, he spoke passionately against it. I don't often quote Joe Biden, but I would urge you all to listen to his full speech on the matter. In fact, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to include his speech in the congressional record following my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Then Senator Biden warned, quote, "History will judge us harshly, in my view, if we eliminate over 200 years of precedent and procedure in this body, and I might add, doing it by breaking a second rule of the Senate, and that is changing the rules of the Senate by a mere majority vote." Senator Biden concluded, quote, "This nuclear option is ultimately an example of the arrogance of power. It is a fundamental power grab by the majority party." Flash forward 17 years later. Joe Biden is still in Washington, and he and his Democratic counterparts are the ones that are exercising that arrogance of power. Now, as the president, Biden just yesterday declared, quote, "We have no option but to change the Senate rules, include getting rid of the filibuster," end quote. So how and why are we at a point where nuking the Senate could even be a possibility? Plain and simple. The Democratic leader who has participated in hundreds of filibusters over the past 5 years, hundreds, folks, hundreds, wants to have his way regardless of the long-standing rules of this institution, the viewpoints of other senators, or even, folks, get this, the wishes of the citizens of his own state. Just like last week, the Democratic leader said the filibuster was being used to, quote, "embarrass the will of the majority," end quote. And therefore, quote, "the Senate will debate and consider changes to the Senate rules on or before January 17th, end quote. Folks, it's not the Senate rules embarrassing the majority, but rather their two-sided flip-flopping on the importance of the filibuster to this institution and to our democracy. Not so long ago, the Democratic leader said eliminating the filibuster would turn, quote, "the cooling saucer of democracy into the rubber stamp of dictatorship," end quote. It'll be, quote, "a doomsday for democracy," end quote. Today, he is the one with the finger on the nuclear button, all because he can't get his way. This is the kind of power grab you would expect from tyrants in socialist nations, who seem to be where the Democrats are taking many of their cues from these days. Tyranny is no way to run a democracy, and destroying the United States Senate for a power grab is certainly not the example we should be setting for the rest of the world. But the hypocrisy doesn't end there, folks. Democrats are manufacturing hysteria that Republican-controlled states are placing what they consider unfair restrictions on voting as an excuse to blow up the Senate and thereby clear a pathway for the rest of their radical liberal agenda. The irony here is that New York, home of the Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, and Delaware, home of President Biden, have some of the most restrictive absentee voting laws in the entire country. Just this past November, the Democratic leader's constituents, his constituents, overwhelmingly voted down a ballot initiative to allow absentee voting without providing an excuse, and another proposal to permit unregistered voters from registering and then voting on election day. They were voted down, his constituents. So in New York, the only way to qualify for an absentee ballot is to be out of the country or sick or have a physical disability. No other reasons are permitted. Now, the senior senator from New York is threatening to destroy the Senate to override the wishes of the residents of his very own state who voted against the policies he is trying to impose on every other state. Did you catch that, folks? He's overriding the will of the people in his own state. Does that sound like democracy to you? It's not Senate Republicans blocking the Democrat leader's agenda. It's his own constituents. Folks, the reality is this election takeover bill is just the beginning, used as an excuse by the majority leader to then break the Senate and strengthen his own grip on power. This party boss mentality may work in New York, but folks, the Senate is not Tammany Hall. While Senate Democrats would have you believe Republicans are somehow limiting the rights of Americans to vote, they, in fact, are the ones plotting to silence millions of Americans. The same partisans on the other side of the aisle who boasted of, air quotes right here, folks, you see them, they boasted just about a year ago of resisting. Just a year ago, they were encouraging resisting, filibustering and blocking just about every proposal or nominee put forth by the prior president. Now they call this tool a threat to democracy. Remember, less than 2 years ago, following the very tragic death of George Floyd, the senator from New York voted to block consideration of a police reform bill put forward by my friend, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. That's just one of the many other examples of common sense bills the Democrats blocked for purely partisan reasons. The real threat to democracy isn't the filibuster, but those politicians who abuse the power with which they have been entrusted. The Democratic leader has already put a chokehold on democracy right here in the Senate, abusing his position to single-handedly block other senators from offering amendments to bills he chooses to bring to the floor. If the majority wants to demonstrate a commitment to democracy, why not start right here in the Senate? Instead of threatening to have less deliberation, why not commit to more? Let's bring up bills that have already had broad bipartisan support, and let's allow more votes on amendments. But rather than starting this new year with a resolution to take this approach and make the Senate a true example of democracy in action, where every voice is heard and respected, the Democratic leader penned each of us a bombastic letter written with the left's usual dramatic flair and theatrics, comparing the filibuster to a dead hand and promising to permanently alter the Senate unless we bend to his wishes. The senior senator from New York should leave the theater for Broadway, where it belongs. And before casting a vote that could fundamentally change the Senate forever, I would urge my Democratic colleagues to take some advice about the intended behavior of the Senate from our nation's greatest statesman, George Washington, and cool it.